Hello everyone, welcome. I'm going to be creating a really pretty Christmas card in this video using some products from Spellbinders. Let me show you what these products are before we start in on our project. This stamp set is called Three Kings and it's a beautiful silhouette stamp set. There are three beautiful sentiments. The first one says peace on earth, and then oh come let us adore him, and wise men still seek him. I'm also going to be using a new stencil. This one is called All the Stars. We're going to be creating a galaxy background with this pretty stencil. So let's get started. I'm going to stamp out all of the images except for the sentiments using my Mini Misty. I'm stamping them onto a piece of Neenah Solar White 110-pound cardstock. And I'm going to stamp them up with some Versamark ink so that I can pour over some clear embossing powder and then emboss these images so they look glossy and pretty. I do end up stamping these out several times just because they are new stamps and it takes a few stampings to condition them. And then I can pour over some clear embossing powder. These images are so pretty and detailed. And there's a lot of really beautiful examples that have already been created using this set. Since these are very solid images to emboss, I'm going to melt the embossing powder from the back of the paper. I've learned this trick, it was probably from Jennifer McGuire, but heat embossing it from the back of the paper really makes your images smooth and pretty. I did stamp it out a few times and tested the theory because I've never done this before from the back of the paper. And they were just a little bit more blotchy when I would heat emboss the images the usual way I do it from the front of the paper. I'll set this paper aside, but I am going to fussy cut them out off camera. And now let's get started on the galaxy background. I'm going to start with my colors first. This is another piece of Neenah Solar White 110-pound cardstock. And I'm pulling out one of my favorite ink pads, and it's kind of dry. I need to either buy a new ink pad or see if they have a re-inker for this, but this is called Delicata Gold. And I want to put a big stripe of that diagonally down this panel. I'm just going to use my pad to try and get more ink out of this. Then I'll just kind of smooth it out with my brush. Next, I'm going to be adding some Peacock Feathers, and it's going to look like a mess here for a little bit, but it comes together beautifully once I start putting the black ink over these colors. But I'm just going to kind of blotchily add colors to this panel. My next one is Wilted Violet. And I want to get the colors good and dark. I was hoping to get the Delicata Gold a little bit darker, but I will have to re-ink my pad. But it ends up looking really pretty. So let's add a little more of the Peacock Feathers. And I'm not even going to blend these together. I just want big dollops of color on this panel. Once I have all of my color down, I'm going to bring in the Black Soot Distress ink. I'll cover this panel completely, almost completely, with the black ink, coming in with the darkest at the edges. And then I'll have a little bit of a lighter touch when I go over some of the areas of color. And I'm just using circular motions to do this, just to make it look cloudy and pretty and bouncy. Then I'll go in between some of the colors. But I want that gold to really stand out. This is going to be a really pretty background. And here it is, all done. I used my heat tool to speed up the drying process. Next, let's use the stencil over it, and I'm going to tape this in place with some of the Best Ever Craft tape. You could, of course, use pixie spray to keep it in place, but I just prefer the tape. Seems to be less cleanup that way. And then I'll pull out my Unicorn Pigment ink. I'm going to press the ink into these small holes and stars. I'm trying to get the stars as bright and white as possible. And then after this, I am going to even come in with some white embossing powder just to really make the stars pop on this panel. So let's take a peek at this galaxy night sky now. And it looks really pretty as it is, but I just want a little bit of a brighter whiteness on the stars. So I'm bringing in some white embossing powder. I'm being careful not to go over the Delicata ink with my white embossing powder, because that ink, no matter how long you let it dry, it just seems to catch all of the embossing powder. I put a little bit down the middle of these two spots of the gold, and you can see how it just catches. I'll bring in a dry paintbrush just to kind of brush some of that away. I'm not worried too much about the specks of white embossing powder that I can't get off of the panel, because it'll just add to the conglomeration of stars. So let's go ahead and melt this embossing powder now, and you can see how the white just pops off of this dark panel. I really like the gold ink on this galaxy background, or this night sky background, because it goes along perfectly with the wise men looking up at the sky for this particular Christmas card. I'm going to use a die to cut out this panel. This is from the Joy Crescent card builder, and I'll link to a video where I used this die set, but I thought this domed die cut was just perfect. So I'll set aside the night sky, and I'm going to emboss a little bit more on a piece of navy blue cardstock. This one is called Cosmic Sky, and it's from Spellbinders. I'll stamp out one of the sentiments and the star from this set on this piece of paper using more white embossing powder. I kind of manipulated the sentiment stamp so that it would arch around my night sky. I think that's going to be a really pretty effect. So let's melt this. It looks really nice on this navy cardstock. And it just says, "Peace on Earth." Once that has cooled down, I'll bring in a tissue and buff off the anti-static powder just to clean up this panel a little bit. I want to put a golden sand dune behind the wise men, so I'm pulling in the Color Block Scenic Scape dies to cut out a heel using some brushed gold cardstock. And this matches really well with the Delicata gold ink in the night sky. So here it is all cut out. I'll just snip off the ends. And we can start putting this card together. So let's add the night sky first. I'm just going to adhere this down flat with some dot liner. I'll attach this right under the sentiment, and you can see how that sentiment just curves nicely around the shape of the night sky. Next, we'll put down the trees. I just added these with a little bit of liquid glue. And then the heel I'm going to pop up with some foam pieces. When I fussy cut my stamped images, I left a little bit of a white border around them so they wouldn't get lost in front of the night sky. Let's clean up the panel a little bit. I'll trim off the overhang. And then the wise men I'm going to glue down flat. I really like all of the touches of the bright white on this card around my images and the stars and the sentiment. They really help to kind of pull this card together. On the top of this wise man, I'm using a little bit of foam so that he is the same height as the heel. And the legs of the camel, I just used a little bit of liquid glue. I'll just wiggle this one into place. I'm going to bring in my white Jelly Roll pen. I wanted the stars, or at least some of the stars, to pop a little bit more, especially where I didn't emboss them on top of the gold ink. So this really helps to add some more white stars to the background. I'm going to mat this panel with some white cardstock. I really like the white edges around this one. And then I can add it to my card base. And this card is done. I'm not going to add any embellishments to it. I just like it the way it is. All of the stars are kind of like an embellishment. And then the shine from the embossed images looks really nice on this card. I never created a galaxy background for a Christmas card before, but I thought it went perfectly with this stamp set. And I hope you'll give it a try for some of your Christmas cards. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. I hope you were inspired. I'll leave all of the links to the products I used listed in the description box below. Have a wonderful crafty day, everyone. Bye.